Hello everybody, I want to welcome you guys back to another episode of What's Your Thought, a talk show for the youth by the youth. I'm your host Keenan Chi and this is my co-host Marcus. And today we're going to be talking about finance with Pastor Gregory on Rich Pastor, Poor Pastor. Welcome on the show, Pastor Gregory.
Thank you.
And it's such a privilege to have Pastor Gregory on the show. He's not a unfamiliar face on What's Your Thought. He's been here. We talked about him on the power of prayer, and it's an absolute privilege to have him. I've heard rumors and news of Pastor Gregory's famous management of his finances and how he's very good with his money. So I'm very interested and excited to get into this discussion with Pastor Gregory. So Pastor, before we start, thank you so much for giving us the privilege of having you on the show again.
Definitely.
Before we start, as we get into this topic, the topic of money is something that's very sensitive. There have been churches split over money, people leaving church over money, and like money in general is very, very messy. So how does money affect our Christian walk to begin with? And does it affect it drastically to the point where it's a factor that we should be focused on?
Yes, I would say that's definitely something that we need to be very considerate about in the context that money is spiritual. We've always heard that said, and there's so much depth in that statement, and I'll tell you why. Because I believe that if we're not careful, we can begin to worship money instead of worship God with money. You understand there's a difference between those two. One, money becomes the priority. It becomes your provider. Money becomes the reason you even want to serve God. It's because you want to be blessed or so on and so forth. But in the process of that, if you used your money to worship God, that means, God, what would you have me do with this? And that is why it really does play a significant role in your Christian life. Because God never intended for us to worship money. God intended us to worship Him with what we have. And so money is something He entrusts to us. So when it comes to money, how does it affect our walk with God? Stewardship and faith. Stewardship is the understanding that God owns everything. And when a person understands that God owns everything, it changes the way they view money and the way they handle money. Number two, when they understand that it requires stewardship, stewardship requires faith. And so when there's faith, and when faith is involved when it comes to money, you do right with it, you obey God with it, you honor God with it. That's why you look at the Bible, and there's so much in the Bible about money. I in our conversation, I mentioned that 16 out of the 38 parables are on money. 2,000 over scriptures in the Bible are concerning money. And you can read on and you can understand that Jesus, even one statistic said that nearly 25% of Jesus's words in the New Testament dealt with biblical stewardship. So money is a huge topic. And Christians have to realize that your faith, your stewardship, and money, they correlate, and they must all honor God.
I feel that in our fellowship, we don't focus on finances. So, is it a priority as a Christian to have good finance?
Yeah, I think having good finance is very subjective. I think the right way of addressing it would be to have a good handle on your finances, which leads us then to the subject of stewardship. Because people vary, right, on a scale of, some are very wealthy. And when you talk about a person being wealthy, you're talking about someone who has loads of finances, loads of money. Then you have another tangent of people, of those who especially may be in a very needy area of their life, where they seem to have very little. They earn just enough to take care of their needs month in and month out. So it's a very subjective matter. So when you ask the question on whether or not we're supposed to be good at finances, or I would assume that you would be implying that financially sound? I would say yes and no. But more important than that would be to have a good handle on your finances. What I mean by that is stewardship. Because like we talked about earlier, if the Bible speaks so much about money, that means not only are we referring to the subject of money, but we must also address on how we manage and handle it. Because when you handle your finances well, you are being a good testimony. And so I'll probably leave you with some thoughts later on some of the possible methods or ways or principles, I would say, to handle your money in the right method and in the right way.
Okay. So you mentioned stewardship and handling money, but like us as youth right now, because this is a youth podcast mainly focusing on the lives of youth, and like we don't have a lot of money in our possession right now.
Right.
And for what we do have our allowances. Maybe some of us have part-time jobs, but we don't have a lot of money. What would you recommend a lot of us youth start out with, or at least start doing right now, putting our practice at a young age so we can build that habit?
So, okay, one of the famous quotes that I've allowed myself to be inspired by is a quote made by a man named Dave Ramsey. He said, personal finances is 80% behavior and 20%, or may even be lesser, head knowledge. So 80% is behavior. So one of the best things you can do as a young person is develop a good habit when it comes to how you handle your finances. The amount is not the question here. It is how you manage what you have that matters. And that is what must stand out when it comes to a young person and how they handle their finances. It is more of me making up my mind that this is all I have. I may only have 10 ringgit to my possession, but how well am I going to use that 10 ringgit? How long can I manage with that 10 ringgit? Right? So how do I develop a good habit? Number one, you exercise self-control. Now, one of the things you notice today, especially in the marketing world that we live in, is you find that there's a lot of advertisements that pop up. You go to Lazada, you go to Shopee, you have all kinds of e-marketing sites that have all kinds of pop-up advertisements. And what do they use these advertisements for? Essentially, to cause you to be lured in, so you would say, hey, I need that, or I want that. But in all reality, if you put on your thinking cap, you realize I can do without it. And so delayed gratification is one of the most important components that a young person can develop. Saying no to yourself. I don't need that. I don't need the latest gadget. I don't need the latest phone. I don't need to have the latest device, whatever it may be. Right? I don't have to have most expensive meal. It's learning to set boundaries and say no to yourself. Self-control is very vital. Another factor that can be added to that is you can try developing a habit of saving. Right? One of the things I did that I think will incredibly help is when you begin to have whether it's an account that you have no access to withdraw from, that you save your money in an account that is such. So when I got married, again, maybe for the young people this might be a little bit off, but I had an account where the only way I could take money out of it was to write a check, or I had to go to the counter to do a withdrawal. So the inconvenience made me refuse spending more than I had with me, right? So saving is very vital, right? The third thing that I would think would help a young person is to read. When it comes to money, you have to learn from the best. You have to learn from those who have gone before you. You have to learn from those who have got their acts together when it comes to money. Don't listen to someone who is heavily in debt. I know this is unpopular or rarely acceptable to say in our culture, but listen to people who have, to some degree, learned to obey God with their money and learn to use their money well in stewardship. So there are some books that I would recommend. There are some books I would say that would be a good read to learn concerning money, and I do encourage young people to read those things.
Maybe you could give us like a list of 3 books. Like I read one that I really enjoyed, which is good, which actually what contributed to the title of this episode, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes.
Extremely charismatic
Indeed.
writer and really enjoyable.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe Martin can put like an image of the book over here, right, Martin? Yeah.
I would think one of the books that I was told to read as a young disciple was a book by Randy Alcorn, Money, Possession, and Eternity. It's a fantastic book, very good. It's an old book, but it really takes you on a journey to understand that God owns everything we have, stewardship. Another book that I would highly recommend, again, you have to learn to apply this to our culture, to our basis here in our country, Asian, but it's a book by Dave Ramsey, Total Money Makeover, also a very good read. Another book that I recently read, I in fact had it for a while, but I finished it not long ago, is a book by David Green. He's the founder of Hobby Lobby, and he wrote a book on giving it all away and getting it all back. Something to that effect. I don't remember the exact title right now, but it's a good book by David Green as well. It's his story about giving and finances and how he managed it. So these would be probably 3 of the good reads that I would recommend, especially Dave Ramsey, because of the simple fact that I've taken a lot of cue from this man on how to manage and handle finances.
Thank you so much, Pastor Gregory. But with all that handling of finances and we do accumulate. I mean, with good handling of finances, you do accumulate wealth. But the Bible says a lot of things about money, like you said. And in 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 10, it says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. What exactly makes money so dangerous to us Christians? And why would the Bible recommend us to be good stewards of our money, but at the same time state that money is a path to destruction?
I think the key word here is love for money, right? And it's referring to a spirit called mammon. Mammon in the Aramaic word simply means the god of riches. Basically, it's a translation for money, but the context of it is simply this. Mammon has a way of removing our trust in God. Mammon is a spirit, okay? And you can idolize mammon, you can idolize money, to the point that you begin to have such confidence in it, assuming that it is what's going to provide for you instead of God. So mammon says, buy and keep, but God says, give and receive. Mammon says, trust in its ability to take care of you. God says, trust in Him to provide for you. So mammon develops an appetite in us to trust in its ability, and it removes our faith and confidence in God. That's what makes money very dangerous. That's what makes the love of money extremely dangerous. Because you start depending on it instead of depending on God. We start assuming, or we start having this belief that it is money that's going to take care of me, when it's actually God who is supposed to take care of you. And once you have this twisted mindset or this delusion that money is going to do that for me, you've slipped away and you've allowed the spirit of mammon to dominate. And that's the danger of it, in short.
That's really interesting, Pastor, because I remember Pastor Allan preached one sermon, and he kind of brought out the image of money in a life of a Christian is that you, as a Christian in life, you can chase money and you'll never be able to reach that level of mammon or that level of money that you desire.
Yes.
Or you can chase God and money chases you afterwards.
Yes.
Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added
Unto you. That's correct. Yes.
Pastor, as a Christian, do you think we have a duty to give to the poor at all times?
Yeah, I think if you're in a position to help someone in need, you can do the best you can. You can help them the best way you can. But I also want to highlight something that matters, because when you read the Bible makes emphasis concerning the poor a lot. The widow, the poor, the needy. And there's no doubt that God has always had compassion toward the poor and for the widow or for the weak. But in the meantime, never forget, remember when Jesus had the woman come and pour the oil on his feet, the alabaster flask, Judas showed up. And what did Judas say? It would have been better if you sold this and gave to the poor. And Jesus reprimanded Judas by saying, the poor you have with you always, but me not. You won't have always. So I think to answer the question, yes, when we have the ability to do it, I believe God expects us to do what we can to be a blessing. But it also comes with wisdom and prudence. So you don't just go and give money to people just because they show up to say they need money. If they have the ability to work, they have the ability to earn for themselves, they have the ability to be able to fend for themselves, I think those are very important factors. You need wisdom, you need to be able to discern, you need to be able, because everything belongs to God. You are just a steward. So you giving money to someone who doesn't need it equals you spoiling them. And so I would be very, very careful about that. But at the same time, if you are a good steward of your money, and you manage your wealth or your finances well, you will find yourself in a place eventually where you will have more than enough to be able to be a blessing to someone. And that's important.
Should we then be careful of those who want to take our money, those who are faking their illness or poverty?
Yes. It comes with stewardship, is understanding that God owns everything. And because God owns everything, you don't own a thing. It all belongs to God. So people will come to you, but you have to remember, God, you own it. I'm just a steward.
I really like what you said just now, Pastor, about the requirement of wisdom for the handling of finances. Bible says how much better to get wisdom than gold and good judgment rather than silver.
Absolutely.
I think that if you seek enough wisdom in your life, which I'm known for being a wisdom nut, that you are able, it plays a bigger role in your finance than anything else. So investing money in books to handle your finances.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for this. We're going to take a break. We're going to take a short break with our But Factually segment. So we'll be right back after this segment.
Hey guys, welcome back to But Factually, conducted by yours truly, Emily. So I've done a little digging about the psychology behind how a person deals with finances. So now let me share with you 3 key points to know behind an individual's personal relationship with money. Firstly, emotions play a really big role. There are times where emotions can be tied with money, and without having that awareness, people will tend to override rational thinking, which would be the drive to their actions. Secondly, anxiety and avoidance. Mental illnesses and mental health issues can lead to poor judgment, inattentiveness to finances, employment jeopardy, and secretiveness, and so much more. People who deal with these issues usually are unable to face financial responsibilities as these people lack energy or the sense of purpose. My third and last and final point, psychologically, you can't escape your family and your past. There's always stories about money being part of a family's identity. You may experience subtle pressure to right the wrongs perpetrated or suffered by previous generations, or the internal pressure to oppose the family money mentality. These may make you want to give back to your family and eventually neglect your own financial needs. So in summary, the key is self-awareness. Much of our emotional world is unconscious, but it's not that hard to access if you know what to look for and have a blueprint for the emotions that can influence your personal relationship with money. That's all I got for you for Birth Factually. I'm passing it back to Keenan.
Thank you so much, Emily, for hosting that Birth Factually segment. Pastor, it is again such a blessing to have you here. Let us close with one final question. Could you recommend one way you handle your money that you feel everyone should put into practice, as they would greatly benefit from putting into practice?
If there was only one thing that I could share, it would be very tough, because the handling of money requires a number of different facets. Okay, I think the first let's talk about priority. If it were to do with priority, it would be put God first. Now, as a student, when I was in school, one of the things I learned is I used to get an allowance every week of 10 ringgits. That back then, you go to school, you get a nasi lemak or even a mee goreng for 1 ringgit, and you bring water from home, so you spend maybe $5-6 a week. But every time my dad gave me the allowance, I set $1 aside for my tithe, and I also set an additional of $3 aside for my offerings. I made it a habit. It became a lifestyle. I began to do that. And so I learned from a young age, from the preaching that my pastor gave me, and the teaching that I found in the Word of God, and all of that, I learned that putting God first is very, very vital. And it is the key to the many miracles and the many doors that God will open. I mean, if there was time, I would share with you that what we've become today is the result of what we've done in the past. The little decisions we made that opened up opportunities, doors, employments, different things through the years. And I think it has to do with understanding that God must always come first when it comes to money. So if I could leave you with one thing, that would be it. But if I could leave you with a few more things, I would say you have to budget. I would say you have to be a good steward. I would say you have to live within your means. I would also say you have to be content. And it may sound offensive to a lot of people, but one thing I think we must be very cautious about in this culture is don't buy now and pay later. So, yeah, I leave you with those thoughts. I mean, it's up in the air, but this is what I do. This is my lifestyle. I've learned to live with what we have within our means, and I've seen God bless that. So I leave you all with that.
I think what you mentioned just now with the delayed gratification especially is something that should be put into practice. Just being grateful and being
Absolutely.
glad with where you are and what you have in life.
Absolutely.
This
Yes.
is fantastic.
Indeed.
But I noticed you mentioned something, and there is a risk factor to this, that you need to have that faith to give into the kingdom of God, to despite knowing that, hey, I might not have that extra finance, but I think I would be doing better with 90% of my finance, or even 80% or 70% of my finance.
Yes.
But with God, then if I had 100% without.
Absolutely. Stewardship is simply that. Stewardship is you trusting God and God saying you can do far more with 90 than 100% if you don't trust me. So that's why when we talked about the first question earlier and you asked me, how does it affect your walk with God? Nearly in every area of your life. You cannot remove faith from how you handle your money. So every time you say, you know what, I'm not going to spend, I'm going to trust God, I'm going to put my faith in God, I don't need to buy this right now, I'm going to wait for God to provide, it takes faith. Every time you get paid and you know, God, I'm strapped with finances, but you say, God, I'm going to tithe and honor you, you step out in faith. That's why I said earlier, and if mammon controls you, mammon will say, don't give. But if God is truly superior in your heart, then you will trust Him and do the opposite of what mammon says. That's what Paul was saying, or that's what Timothy was addressing in the book of 1 Timothy when he said, when Paul said, the love of money is the root of all evil. When mammon controls you, you cannot trust God, you cannot obey God.
Thank you so much, Pastor Gregory, for
Absolutely.
being on the show. It's like an absolute privilege to have you on. Before we close, I just want to make some short announcement. We have services Wednesday night, 8 p.m., Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m., and Sunday night, 7 p.m. Prayer 1 hour before. It's going to be right here. Martin is going to put it right here, right here, or maybe here, or maybe here on Marcus' face. I also conduct a youth Bible study in Brother Marcus's house. For more information, you can come and check with us on the link in the phone number in the description. Or for the youth events, you can contact Brian, whose phone number will also hopefully be in the link in the description. Anyway, again, thank you so much for Pastor Gregory making it out in this show. Always glad to have you here. I hope we can have you on for more episodes in the future to come.
Sure.
But if Marcus has no closing thoughts, we will be ready to end. Okay. Well, in that case, I'd like to end this with a final. What's your thought?